everyone, and welcome to Back to the Future, the podcast where we take a trip down Philly sports memory lane and ask the question, what if? You might notice you can actually possibly see me if you're watching this on YouTube. I'm experimenting a little bit today with the video portion of the podcast, so I'm not sure really how this is going to turn out. If you're not watching it on YouTube, then you won't see me. But typically, I will not be doing 2 episodes a week. However, due to some of the news stories that came out yesterday regarding the Sixers and they're wanting to build a downtown stadium, I thought this was the perfect time to come on and talk about one of the what ifs that I had. If you listened to the first episode, you might have heard me mention that I started to write a book and I went through all of the teams and had a list of what ifs. The majority of them were for actual games or situations that happen. However, I did have a few random ones that were just more about the team. And one that I had was back in the early 2000s, the Phillies were exploring different areas in the city to build their stadium. And the question of a downtown stadium came up. So when the story broke yesterday morning that the Sixers were looking to build a stadium downtown, it just really sparked, and I wanted to jump on this while the story was still fresh. So for those of you who don't know or are not necessarily up to date on Philly sports, the Sixers ownership team announced yesterday that they're planning a new arena that's going to cost $1.3 billion with a B, privately funded, which is key. And we'll get into that once we start talking about the Phillies proposal. It's going to be built in the Fashion District. Yeah, if you're like me, I had to look that up too. I didn't know Philly had a fashion district. I lived in the city for like 16, 17 years. Never knew. Apparently, they're looking to build at 10th and Market, right around the area of the Gallery, which I guess, no offense, but the Gallery is high fashion. But again, that's a whole nother issue I don't want to get into. But what I'm hearing is the stadium or the arena is going to be very similar to Madison Square Garden in New York. And I couldn't be happier about it. I actually think that whole area is just a waste of resources that has so much potential because you have Old City right there, all of the historical things for Philly. You have Independence Hall, the Liberty Bell, the new Revolutionary War Museum, the Constitution Center. So there's so much to do. And at one point, I think there was Disney or someone was planning on building something there. Some things happened. They started the construction and they had to stop for whatever reason. There was just a big hole right there on Market Street. And for years, I just thought that there was just so much potential there. So the fact that this is where the proposed new arena is going to go, I think is going to be great simply for that area. But I think for the city as a whole, and they could definitely use a little bit of a boost right now, especially post-COVID. So I think from that aspect, it's definitely going to be good. Philly fans, being Philly fans though, who you could give them 2 situations, 2 scenarios, and they'd find a way to complain. I love them to death. I am one. I probably complain about unnecessary things myself sometimes. Perfect example, I remember vividly at the Eagles Super Bowl parade, people complaining that there were too many people at the parade. So those are kind of gives you the kind of gist of what Philly fans, I think it was the greatest day as in Philadelphia sports history, most likely, definitely in Eagles history. And there was still something wrong. I don't know whether it's because we're so conditioned to expect the worst that we have to find that dark cloud in the silver lining, so to speak. But yesterday, again, this is it. Anybody who's ever been down to the South Philly sports complex where the Sixers, Flyers, Eagles, and Phillies play. No, it's a mess. I mean, it's great when you get down there and you settle in, whether you're tailgating, going to Xfinity Live, whatever you might be doing. It's great once you're there. Getting there absolutely sucks. There's pretty much 2 main ways in. You have the 2 highways coming in. Both of those highways in that area on a non-game day are terrible. to begin with traffic. So throw in the fact that in an Eagles game, you have 70 some thousand, Phillies 40, whatever it may be, jamming into that one area. Other than the subway, there's no public transportation either. So that's a whole other story. So to me, putting the arena downtown where it's right there off the regional rail. So anybody within the entire 5-county area, anybody within the city can hop on, whether it's the bus, the trolley, the subway, the L, whatever it could be, take it to Suburban Station, take it to Temple Station, whatever, and just hop on the regional where, boom, you come out. And again, if you ever taken the train to Madison Square Garden or into New York in general, there's a Madison Square Garden train stop. You come right out underneath the garden. So all I hear is people complain about the traffic at the stadiums and the parking and how much it costs. So to me, solves that. But then you have, I don't want to go down there. So it's just one of those things. It definitely made me laugh. It's why I love Philly fans and I love being one. But come on now, like to me, this is something good for everyone involved. And unlike what we're going to find out here in a few minutes about the Philly stadium, this isn't going to disrupt too many people's lives for the most part. So I don't know. But again, it's just the perfect example of Philly fans being Philly fans. It's what we do. It's what we're good at. So I shouldn't have been surprised, but I just wanted, like I said, wanted to come on, talk about this a little bit because it did strike me. There's a lot of similarities, but then there's some big differences that I think is going to help this stadium hopefully come to fruition a lot better than what the Phillies did. So again, this is not the first time this has happened. Veterans Stadium, I love it. I have my little piece of the vet over there. It was getting old. I mean, I think it was old within 5 years of it being built, but basically the Eagles wanted to stay in South Philly. And I think that made sense. And I mean, as an Eagles season ticket holder, to me, yes, it's a pain in the ass to get down there. It's a pain in the ass to get home. But if you're going to be down there all day, you're going to tailgate, you're going to go to the game and just enjoy the whole environment. Having it down in South Philly out of the way of everything completely makes sense. I've said for years, especially recently with a lot of the technology with TVs and all the different things that the networks are doing, watching the game in person is terrible. Absolutely terrible. I don't go to the games to watch the game per se. Obviously, I'm watching the game, but it's more for the ambiance. It's going down, tailgating early. It's going down, having some drinks. It's going down, being with the same people I've been with for 20 some years inside the stadium. The actual watching of the game, I'd much rather just sit here on my couch and watch it that way. But again, that's not what the point of this is. So again, when they were looking for the new stadiums, keeping the Eagles in South Philly made a whole lot of sense. The Phillies, on the other hand, they wanted to build a downtown stadium, which made sense because at the time, I think in the early 90s, the first one to come out was Camden Yards. And if you've ever been there, it's like we were down there recently, as in like probably 8 years ago. It seems recent, but the way that's built, it seems very closed in compared to the way Citizens Bank Park is, because it was one of those first ones that was downtown. It was the open concept and whatever, but it still had a lot of those elements of those cookie cutter stadiums from the 70s. So everybody was kind of jumping on board, and the Phillies wanted to be a part of that. So they had a list of, I'm thinking back at the time, there's a ton of them, but I know the 12th and Vine location, which ultimately was one of the finalists in Chinatown, was one. They wanted to, Broad and Spring Garden was one. The Delaware Avenue waterfront at the end of Spring Garden, kind of down where Yards Brewing is now, the casino. West Philly in University City, I think it was like 31st and Walnut. Then Port Richmond and Northern Liberties, they came up as potential replacements. And to me, they all presented some pros and cons. I love the idea. I still do love the idea of a downtown ballpark. But ultimately it didn't happen. So at the time, John Street was the mayor in the city. And ultimately, I guess it came down to his decision as the mayor of Philly. And thinking back, there was a lot of taxpayer money, both from the state. I think Ed Rendell had promised, because Pittsburgh was building their new stadiums around the same time. So somehow, I guess the city was going to put in some money too. I don't recall the specifics, but however it came down to it, John Street was the one that ultimately made the decision to make 12th and Vine in Chinatown the spot. Well, as anybody would probably, but I think it gets amplified in Philadelphia. The residents of Chinatown, the business owners, they complained. They didn't want it there. They thought it was going to just really disrupt what they had going on down there. And as I was researching this, it turned out that apparently that site was sort of, they gave up on it. They decided that wasn't going to be the site. And John Street decided last minute that that's what he wanted to do. Well, then you throw in the fact that season ticket holders were complaining. Ultimately, the Phillies were complaining. I don't know whether they were complaining because everybody else was, and they just said, no, this isn't where we want it, or they had other ideas. I think they, if I'm thinking back correctly, they were very into putting it down at Delaware Avenue and Spring Garden, which really would have been a cool shot, having kind of like in San Francisco where you can hit it into McCovey's Cove. Like if they would have set that stadium up the right way, they could have hit balls into the Delaware River, which really could have been cool, and it really could have built up that area. But ultimately, John Street chose 12th and Vine. I remember this because I was living in the city at the time. There's a ton of protests, people from Chinatown, people from the other areas that wanted it. So it ended up being put back in South Philly, which to me, ironically, they bitched about it when the vet first went in, and then they were complaining about it. They were like, okay, now you're going to put another stadium down here. And they were complaining about the same things, the fans on game day, how bad the traffic is, where are people going to park? So that's sort of where we ended up. And I'm sure I missed some details in there, but ultimately the Phillies wanted a downtown stadium. It became John Street's decision somehow, some way, for some reason. I don't want this to turn into a political podcast, so I will keep my mouth shut about some of the things that happened when he was the mayor of the city. But ultimately, what if John Street didn't pick the site that was completely already given up on by everybody, and chose this Broad and Spring Garden or Spring Garden in Delaware? Or what if he worked with the residents and business owners in Chinatown to make it work, even though everybody else had already dismissed it? Thanks for effing this up, John. But it could have been good. So ultimately, I think if we think about it from the team perspective, I don't know if moving the stadium out of South Philly and putting it somewhere downtown really has that much of an impact on the way the team was. I think going into it, if even the final year or two at the vet is when they went out and they spent big money, signed Jim Tomei, and was basically, they were using him to sort of bridge that gap into the new stadium, which ultimately stunted the growth and promotion of Ryan Howard, but that'll be another episode. But they still had the guys in the farm system. They still had Utley, Rollins, Howard, the core of those teams that from 07 to 2012 or 2011 won the 5 division titles in the World Series. So I don't think from a on the field product, it would have made that much of a difference. Maybe some of the home runs may have been different. I don't know if downtown the ball wouldn't have flown out as more. Citizens Bank tends to be known as a hitter's park. So I don't know if being downtown would have changed that, whether it would have made it easier. But for the sake of argument, I don't think it would have had much of an impact on the on-field product. However, it would have had huge impact, I feel, on the city. Because if you look at some of those places that they were talking about, so Chinatown, okay, it would have been tight. To me, it didn't make any sense to have it there anyway, just because of the demolition that would have had to have been done there. But look at Broad and Spring Garden. That area, I used to work at Broad and Brown. So from basically Girard Avenue up to City Hall, between the new convention center, between all the new restaurants, all of the apartment complexes, the Met theater is down there. There's just so much buildup that would have probably still happened and maybe even helped kind of speed up that process if they put it there. I mean, Delaware Avenue and Spring Garden on the waterfront, the casinos and all of that, like there's so much traffic and everything there. I think that would have made sense. I can't necessarily picture where the 31st and Walnut would have been in University City, but I know they've been doing a ton of construction down that way. And then Port Richmond and Northern Liberties, geez, for the past 10 to 20 years, like that, those two areas have been blowing up with restaurants and new homes and things like that. So I think any of those places, you throw in a Phillies stadium tied into the fact, don't forget, they started to get good then. So it would have done all kinds of things for the restaurants, and who knows, maybe people would come down and stay for a weekend in some of the hotels downtown. I know some people probably do that now, but I don't really know too many people that do that, but people might come from out of town fans, stay for the entire weekend, come in, watch a game on Friday night, go around town on Saturday, grab an early lunch or a late lunch, early dinner, go to the next game, do what, there's just the possibilities just there. I mean, not to mention the jobs that are going to be created for building the stadium and all those things, and just keeping those restaurants and the whole area. I just feel like there was a missed opportunity. Now everything's down in South Philly. You have Xfinity Live, which, I mean, I guess this might be me showing my age, but it stinks going in there because it's always so crowded. If there was other things and other options, yes, I know it's going to be crowded on game day anywhere you go. However, you're downtown, there's so many different options, and then you can just walk to, like I said, just a wasted opportunity. Again, who knows? And I think financially it would have impacted the city. And thinking about just where the city is today, I think they could have used that. I think that having the World Cup come here in a few years is going to be big for the city. Every time the NCAA tournament comes here, they talk about the impact it has on the city. So personal examples I've been to Boston and Fenway Park. Yes, it's a very old stadium, but there's no tailgating there. Like once you go in, there's just a row of bars, row of restaurants, and people just, it's kind of like it has a street fair feel. And I think that to me was a lot more fun than just standing out. Don't get me wrong, I had a lot of fun just standing out in the parking lot, throwing washers and having beers. But I think being able to make it an event, like a date night almost, I think would have done wonders for those restaurants in the city. Baltimore is the same way. And to me, it was hard to get used to this because I'm used to, you have to drive down, get stuck in traffic, and here you go, pay whatever it is. And now, I mean, it's $25, I think, just to park for a Phillies game, which is insane. But I think having the ability to just take public transportation, walk, it could have just done so much and helped out so many people in the city. It obviously would have eased traffic issues down in South Philly. There wouldn't have been as many traffic jams because I don't think you'd have as many people driving. Like, I mean, I would love to be able to just hop on the train and go straight down to the stadiums. Obviously, right now I can't because I have to get off and then I have to hop on the subway, or I have to drive out of my way to Fern Rock, and then it's just a pain. And in order to do that, I think, and again, this is something that I think they should look into anyway, but expand the regional rails down into South Philly. I think for this Sixers stadium or the stadium that could have been for the Phillies, having the public transportation being able to drop you off within a block or less of the stadium, that's huge. Because even now, if you don't get down to a game by a certain time, you're going to have to park all the way down by the seafood factories and walk your way up. And it's a far walk, especially if it's hot. Like, don't give me, it's a mess. So having that ability to just completely get dropped off a block or closer to the stadium is huge. And the fact that now it's not an all-day event. There's times that maybe, like, my kids now are getting older, they're going to be in sports. So even to go down to an Eagles game, like it's an all-day thing. But now it's like, you know what? Hey, let's hop on the train, go down, boom, Market East, we're right there, or boom, wherever they ended up putting that stadium, it just would have been more convenient. So I think it was a missed opportunity. I love Citizens Bank Park. Don't get me wrong. I wish we could take that, put it right downtown. And I don't know how many of you have seen some of the pictures on Twitter where people are like, hey, here's where this new, but like it kind of fits. Like, they built that stadium that has that old school sort of look like Camden Yards does. So it's just one of those things where I think it's a missed opportunity. Again, we ended up winning the World Series down there in South Philly, but what could have been? We could have had that and just people in the streets and just partying. It would have been good. So with this Sixers stadium now, one of the issues that did run into problems with the Philly stadium, even in South Philly, were the taxpayer money and their funding. So hopefully this Sixers arena remains private. Since it's basketball, there's not as many people. You're not going to have a 70,000 seat arena. So hopefully they can learn from the mistakes. And since it's smaller, it will make more sense. Who knows? Maybe they can land a major college basketball tournament. Excuse me, with the way the landscape is changing with conferences and things like that, maybe they can get the Big East or one of these basketball conferences that ultimately are going to form after all of these big conferences form their super conferences. Philly's in line for a WNBA team. Maybe this helps the process for WNBA. I, for one, especially with a daughter and a wife who played basketball, I would love it. I would probably have season tickets or at least go down to a ton of games. It's still close to the casinos, all the downtown attractions. I think it's a win-win for everybody. And I think, I don't know why Philly fans were complaining about it. And as I mentioned, the landscape of college football is changing, but maybe my Temple Owls can use this as a blueprint for their own on-campus stadium. And that was the biggest thing for you. Okay, I won't get into that because Temple's going to be one of the ones that left out. But a guy can hope, can he? But so what if John Street chose a different site? Would the Phillies have been downtown? Again, I don't think it would have changed the feel of the team and how things happened on the field, but I think it would have had a major, major impact on the city, which I don't think would be a bad thing the way things are going right now. So be sure to hit me up on Twitter, Jimbo_Mott. Let me know what you think. Check out our new webpage at podpage.com/back/to-the-future with a PH. But again, I would love to know what you think. Did you like seeing my face? Did you watch this? Hopefully this did come out. This is the first time I'm doing it on Zoom, so I don't know if I just wasted the past 30 minutes or so. But hopefully you'll be seeing a lot more of me. This will probably help me with guests down the line. But again, thank you for tuning in. Have a great weekend and go Sixers.